In today's video, we need to look at the financial health of the US consumer because consumer spending makes up about 70% of US GDP. And I want to begin with a simple question. How are you doing financially? If you are doing well, then you are very fortunate because a lot of people are not. I'm going to show you some data, and honestly, it is unsettling. Let's start here. A record number of Americans are taking emergency withdrawals from their 401k retirement accounts. According to Vanguard, 6% of people enrolled in 401k plans made what is called a hardship withdrawal. That means they took money out early because of serious financial need. This is a record high, up from 5% a year ago. According to Vanguard's data, the top reasons for these hardship withdrawals are avoiding foreclosure or eviction at 36%, medical expenses at 31%, tuition at 13%, home repairs at 11%, and buying a home at 5%. Now, the problem is obvious. When people pull money out of their retirement accounts to survive today, they are taking away money they will need later in life. I understand it. If you need the money, you need the money. Life happens, emergencies happen, bills do not wait. But even so, this is still a serious warning sign. If you had to take a hardship withdrawal, then you already know the situation is not good. And somehow, you have to find a way to deal with the immediate problem without completely destroying your future retirement security. Now, let me show you something else. According to the Associated Press, 7% of retirees are now returning to work because they need the money. That is also a record high. It was 6% a year ago, and even that was already a record. Among retirees who are going back to work, 48% said they are doing it because they need the money and they feel negative about the economy. Another 41% said the cost of everyday living has simply become too high. And 11% said their main reason for returning was that they were bored and wanted to stay active. Now let's move on to debt. Consumer credit card debt in the United States has reached a record high of $1.28 trillion. This data comes from the New York Federal Reserve. That is up 5.5% compared to a year ago. Right now, about 170 million Americans have credit cards, and 60% of credit card users carry a balance from month to month. In other words, they do not fully pay off the card each month. They keep part of the debt and pay interest on it. And the average interest rate on a credit card is now around 20%. Now, I want to show you another important trend. This comes from a Federal Reserve research report that runs through the end of 2025 and was published in February 2026. When you look at delinquency rates, which means people falling behind on payments, you can see that credit card delinquencies are rising sharply. On the chart, credit cards are represented by the dark blue line. In 2022, that line was around 4%. By the end of 2025, it had doubled to 8%. If you look at the yellow gold line, that trend is also rising. It is not as bad as what we saw during the 2008 housing crash, but it is clearly moving in the wrong direction. But what really stands out is the red line. That red line shows student loan delinquencies. The chart goes all the way back to 2003, and student loan delinquencies are almost off the chart. Then, if you shift over to serious delinquency, which means payments are 90 days late or more, student loans look even worse. It is extremely alarming. More than 42 million Americans have student loan debt. And while the Federal Reserve data goes through December 31st, 2025, the most recent figures show that as of February, about 25% of student loan borrowers are delinquent. That means roughly 1 out of every 4 borrowers is behind on payments. And total outstanding student loan debt has now gone above $1.6 trillion, according to the Congressional Research Service. Going back to the Federal Reserve reports, total household debt delinquency rose to around 4.8% of all loans in the fourth quarter of 2025. Now, compared with the Great Recession, that may not sound extremely high, but what matters most is the direction of the trend. Just 1 year earlier, the delinquency rate was around 3.6%. Now it is 4.8%. That is a major increase in a short amount of time. In fact, the current level is the highest it has been since 2017. And when delinquency rates start rising across many different types of debt, That usually tells you households are under serious financial pressure. The data is not moving in a healthy direction. So when we are told that we are living in a golden age, I have to say this very clearly. The data does not support that claim. We are being told by politicians that this is a time of low inflation, low unemployment, and strong wage growth. I do not know how you feel, but I have a healthy amount of skepticism. I honestly do not know what country they are describing, because it does not feel like an accurate description of what many Americans are living through. We are told inflation is 2.4%. We are told wages are growing at 3.8%. And based on those numbers, the conclusion is that wages are outpacing inflation, so Americans should be getting ahead financially. But now, let me show you something else. The labor market has gotten so weak that they cannot even hide it anymore. What do I mean by that? Normally, they release a number like the US added 50,000 jobs in February, and then a month later, they quietly revise it downward and admit the number was much worse. That is usually how it works. But now the situation is so bad that even the first number came in negative. In February, the economy reportedly lost 92,000 jobs. And I am telling you right now, just wait. There is a good chance that number gets revised lower and ends up looking even worse. Now look at wage growth over the past 4 years. The trend is clearly going down. Then look at unemployment over the past 4 years. The trend is clearly going up. Now, yes, I understand that a 4.4% unemployment rate is still historically low. If you look at unemployment across the past 80 years, 4.4% is still a low number. But from my point of view, that is exactly the problem. If unemployment is already this low and people are still struggling this badly, then where do things go from here? In my view, there is more room for unemployment to rise than to fall. And that is not good. So think about what we have looked at so far. You saw the delinquency trend. You saw the wage growth trend. You saw the unemployment trend. And my view is simple. If Americans are not thriving in an environment with 4.4% unemployment and 2.4% inflation, then we are going to have even bigger problems a year from now. That is all I am saying. If this is supposed to be the golden age, then I do not even want to imagine what the non-golden age is going to look like. Because according to the trend, that is where we may be heading. That is how I interpret the data. You saw the numbers for yourself. Let me know what you think. Now, I do want to mention one bright spot, because it is not all bad news. Something that is helping, at least temporarily, is larger tax refunds. These bigger refunds are tied to President Trump's tax code changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill. About half of Americans have filed their taxes so far. The average tax refund is around $3,800, which is an 8.8% increase from the prior year. So yes, I am sure that has helped millions of Americans in the short term. But once that refund money is spent, that temporary financial relief is gone, and then for many people, it is back to the same financial pressure. So here is my opinion. Millions of Americans are struggling, and the evidence is everywhere. Rising debt, rising delinquencies, record retirement hardship withdrawals, growing student loan problems, and record credit card balances. In my opinion, all of this is happening because wages are not keeping up with the true cost of living. Now someone might say, what do you mean? What I meant is that inflation is 2.4% and wages are growing at 3.8%. So wages are rising faster than inflation. My response is simple. I do not trust the government's inflation data. That is the polite way to say it. Because in the real world, it does not feel like wages are keeping up, not with housing costs, food costs, medical costs, insurance costs, and daily living expenses. So why is this happening? In my opinion, the deeper cause is money printing by the Federal Reserve. A lot of people blame politicians first. And yes, politicians spend too much. But the politicians would not be able to keep spending these huge amounts if the Federal Reserve did not create the money in the first place. That is why I believe the central bankers are the root source of the problem. So that is where things stand right now with the financial health of the US consumer. It is not good. I showed you the data, and the trend is moving in the wrong direction. I know this is not the most uplifting video, but you deserve honesty. You deserve the truth. Thank you so much for your support. Please subscribe, and I wish you a happy life ahead. Take care.